Hi guys, today I thought I'd do a video on how to tune up the Super Tenere, do the spark plugs, do the air filter. I generally ride around 10,000 miles a season, so when it's February in New England like it is right now, I start jonesing, and that's the time I save to work on the bike. Get everything on the internet, store it up, pick a nice day, nobody around, and get this done. So I'll try and lead you through what it takes to do that work. Through the years I've looked for a lot of instructional videos on YouTube for the Tenere, and there is just not a lot out there. And the bike is good because it allows you to do work without too much trouble, without too many tools. And if you like to do your own wrenching like I do, the first time you do it, it's scary and confusing. But after you've done it a couple of times and you know where the nuts and bolts are and what to do and what not to do, it's not too bad. So my bike is a 2013 Super Tenere, but pretty much they haven't done a lot of changes to them since then. I think everything works the same all the way up through the latest 2018s. So let's do this. The step, which I've already done, is to take this side panel off. There's just like 3 or 4 of like self-locking bolts on there that spin right off. This comes out. I have the alt-rider engine guards on this bike. The nice part about the Tenere, the way the tank works, is you don't have to touch any of those guards to get at what you need to get at. So disconnected the battery, which should always be the first step when you're working on something. And the next thing we have to do, get the seat off, you just turn the key, the seat lifts right up, comes right off. There's a pivot point here where the tank is going to rotate up. So what we got to do is we've got to get, in order to get that, we're going to take the other side panel off, which we'll do first. This side panel off enough to get at the tank bolts. There's just 1, 2, 3 of the self-locking screws that you need to remove. I've got them out, and then once you do that, that'll allow you to move that panel over enough to get at these 2 bolts that hold the tank in on this left-hand side. On this side and on the other side, there is 2 10mm bolts here that hold the tank in against like this pivot arm. So what you want to do is you want to pull those off on both sides. What we're going to do is we're going to flip the tank back and get it out of the way. So you want to make sure your handlebars are straight. One of the things I should have mentioned here is that you want to empty your gas tank before you do this so it's not so heavy. And what I do is I get one of those siphon pumps you get at the hardware store for like a few bucks. You pump the ball, tube goes down in the tank, I get a gas tank to the side, and I just empty that tank before I actually put it in the basement for the winter. So when you get that all set, just give this tank a little pull. It's going to come right up. Get it like about as far back as it'll go, and I use a bungee cord to hold it there. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Once you have it up, it's not going to go anywhere. And what that does, it allows you to get at the top of your air filter, so you can get that off. Your plugs are going to be down under your air filter. So this box has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Phillips head screws that have to come up. The one in the back is a little bit tricky, and there's a center plug here that underneath it there's another Phillips head under there. So let's we'll pull those out. Go ahead and pull those up around. Grab that with a pair of pliers. Give it a twist. That'll come out. And down inside here in the middle is one more Phillips head screw. Once you get all those off, you just give this cover a little pop, and that'll come right off. And then your air filter sits in here. Give that a little tug, and that whole piece will come off. So this whole piece has to come out in order to get at the plugs. This is a little bit tricky because there's some hoses that attach underneath that I'll attempt to show you. That air box are 2 bolts, 2 10mm bolts. Electrical connector right there on the right hand side. You just want to give that push down on the little tab and give it a pull. Hard to see, but underneath the filter box on both sides are the intakes, the air intakes, and on either side there's a strap that connects the plastic opening in the bottom of the breather box to the intake, and you got to get your hex head in there, and you can loosen that on that side. Just loosen that on that side until they boot loose. You'll see the clamp loosen up so that the fitting comes right out of the inside of it. All right, so once you get those bolts out, you get the two straps out from underneath. Sometimes see there's a little residue in there you want to wipe out, but you just give this like a tug, and that'll release it. That box up. Once you can lift that box up, underneath here, there's a hose that runs from the center of that air box down. Now, it is the ball bustingest of all designs, because you got to get a plier in there to loosen the strap to get it off, which isn't impossible, but the hard part is when you go to put it back on after, there's just not a lot of room to get at it. Looks like when that comes off, just the thing's hanging down, straps underneath. That'll allow us to do is to take this whole box out. And now we're finally in. And our spark plugs, 1, 2, 3, 4 down in there. You can see that on the Teneres, water gets down in there when it rains and stuff like that. Water and dirt, and when you wash it, there's just no way to get at them. So what I try and do is clean that area all up before I start pulling those plug wires off. Clean up the intakes here. I find the easiest way to do this is just to kind of loosen up that dirt and debris as much as you can, and then use a shop vac to get it all out of there. One of these plugs, these 4 plugs, 2 per cylinder. Remember, if you go to do this yourself, you got to buy 4 plugs and not 2. I made that mistake a couple of years in a row. So right down in here on each of the plugs is the electrical connection for them. There's a little tab, you give it a push, and that'll pop off, and that'll allow you to get this piece off. That is the wire for the plug. There's a 10mm bolt on each one of these that you got to get off. I'm going to show you with an easy one. Some of these other outer ones are they're harder to get at, and you got to think about it a little bit, especially when you get the plug out. But I'll show you the easy one, and you can figure out the harder ones. There's a ratchet with a swivel end on it. It allows you to make that corner. You just got to be careful, because obviously you don't want to strip the head of a bolt, because that would just be one more thing to contend with. And then the rubber part, get a good grip on it, twist it, and that'll pop out as well. You can see it's a little bit of dirty, a little bit of rust on it. Plug socket, long extension. This is the part when you get to some of these other plugs, sometimes you gotta use the swivel, and you gotta use a couple of different length extensions to get at them. Now what you should really have is a spark plug socket with a rubber inside, so that you can it holds onto the top of the plug and pulls it out. But I lost my rubber insert, so I'm just gonna reach down in there, get a hold of that plug, and pull it out. The spark plugs, the NGK CPR8 EV-9. I go with the stock ones. This is what comes with the bike. That's what the owner's manual calls out. And I change them every year, every 10,000 miles. I haven't had any problem with them, so they seem to be good plugs. Other guys may argue, but I don't know, they work for me. Plug gap on the new ones per the owner's manual is 0.8 to 0.9 millimeters, so just use your little handy dandy spark plug gapping tool. That should fit snug. What goes onto the plug after you get it out? What you want to do is make sure these things are clean. They get dirty. There's a rubber gasket underneath here. It's amazing the stuff that gets in here just from everyday riding, dust and dirt and stuff like that. I clean those all out with a rag. You know, inspect them, look at the bottom piece, make sure that rubber's not cracked, make sure the top part's not cracked, you know, your connector's good and stuff like that. These things, I've had to replace one of them, and you know, they're really expensive, and it's just one more thing that's going to cost you a lot of money if it's not working right. But on the other hand, you don't want to have it not working and going on long distance rides with it. So just another tip, you know, clean them up, keep them good. Get the new plug on. Drop it in. Tighten it down. These plugs, you want them to be snug, but to make a good seat. But you want to make sure you don't over tighten them. You can crack the porcelain on them, and that won't be good for anybody. Clean that up. Get that back in there. Electrical connector pops back on, and there you go. So that's one done. That's, like I said, that's probably the easiest one in the row, but you get it. 4 plugs have been replaced. Before you go to put the air filter box back on, just, you know, make sure all these electrical connections are good and they're snapped in. I double checked every one of those bolts. I just use a 10mm wrench. You can get on there quick and do it. You just want to make sure. You don't want to get this all back together and find out that you forgot something, which I've done. And make sure this electrical connection comes under the bracket there. You're going to clip that back in as well. So we'll put everything back together the way it came apart, and then I'll just show you the air filter when we get to that. This breather box that came out, you know, it's you're going to see there's going to be like some oil residue and stuff in there. I find there's always a little bit of something going on in there. So while you got it out, just clean the thing up really good. Get rid of everything that's in there. It's usually not too bad. And there's a little drain plug down here on the bottom, which collects up the excess oil that gets into the filter. That's something you really should empty more than every 10,000 miles. I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of full. You should really pop that off a couple of times a year and drain that out. It's just got a little clamp on there. So it's something I always forget to do. And then every season when I pull this out, I go, oh crap, I forgot to do that. So don't be like me, do it right. Back, hose back up on there. This is the way it's going to sit. You want that connection's going to come down like that and pick up that other connector. Filter, I like the K&N. I think they make really good stuff, works really well. This is the YA120. When you put the filter in, it's tough to know what's the top and what's the bottom, but there's a little hole right here, and that hole's got to line up with this hole down here, which is where the screw goes in from the top. So if you put it in backwards, you'll see it doesn't line up. You put it in the right way, it lines right up there. Make sure when you put your tank back down, there's hoses that come out the bottom. Air hoses. You just want to make sure you get underneath and give them a little bit of a tug to get them back down where they're supposed to hang. Plugs then, that's the air filter. Pretty much the basic components for the tune-up. I'll do the oil changes later on. One of the things that comes up is getting the valves adjusted. The owner's manual recommends every 25,000 miles. My bike has 30,000. I had them done last year. To do them yourself has got to be, I can't imagine. The first step in doing the valves is to remove the engine from the bike, That's a little more work than I want to undertake. I had them done at the dealer. It was expensive. It was kind of time consuming. It was there for a few days. But in the end, everything worked out. I didn't feel any difference, but they did tell me at the dealer they needed adjusting. So the next one will be in 50,000 miles. Maybe I'll have the bike. Maybe I'll have something else by then. But that's up to you how you want to do it or if you want to have it done. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. If you give this a try, have fun and be patient.